Welcome into the Tuesday edition of Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. Joe, good morning. How are you?
Great. Been home, 36 hours? About time to go. Time to go.
About time to get on out of here.
See you later.
Time to hit the road, ladies and gentlemen.
They don't care.
How long is that drive?
Yeah. 8.
Okay. I guess that's better than I thought.
Yeah, and it's via a long story that no one cares about, but it's via East Lansing and like dropping stuff off and picking stuff off from child and et cetera, et cetera. So, we'll turn it into it's like you're going, you got to go to, get groceries, but also how about a little Bed Bath & Beyond?
That's right. Yeah. Comfort. Two birds, one stone. I like it.
There you go. That's right.
Nick Keyser, how we doing? What's going on?
We're vibing, as Joe's shirt says, right?
It's a good shirt.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Good shirt. Pretty person on there, too.
Well, I was thinking about this for the show. What do you guys think?
Just having the camera directly on my face on your shirt. I don't hate it.
I'll just talk like this, see? What do you think?
How about no?
Oh, man.
I think it's pretty awesome, but all right. Whatever, suit yourself.
Master puppeteer, Joe Rexrode, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot to get to on the program today. Caroline Fenton will join us at 7 o'clock. Mike Herndon from paulkowarski.com at 8:15. We'll get into the Titans with him. Obviously, the NCAA tournament's still going on. In the meantime, coaching hires here with Vanderbilt. We'll get into their newest men's basketball coach, Mark Byington, and what that means for the program coming up later this hour. Also, is Coach Cal back? He did his radio show last night and said a lot of things. So see what that looks like. Get into that more deeper this hour as well. And, of course, a gigantic game tonight for the Predators against the Vegas Golden Knights. Vegas goes to St. Louis last night. They win in overtime, and they are now 3 points behind the Nashville Predators in the standings. So a giant game tonight at Bridgestone Arena as the Predators host the Vegas Golden Knights. So we'll get into all that throughout the day here on the show today. We begin, Joe, with the Tennessee Titans. And I'm just throwing the question out there because we went through all the moves and the job that Rand Carthon has done this offseason yesterday here on the program, and there's been a lot. And the L'Jarius Sneed trade, we'll still wait to see when that is actually made official and the physical and all those different things. But the Titans have made a ton of moves over the course of this offseason. There's still the draft coming up. My question is, how good is this team going to be? And is there a chance that the Titans might actually be a decent team? Now, I'm looking at this, and it's interesting to watch what Vegas says about this. And I saw our friends at Music City Bets put this out there yesterday on Twitter. The Titans over-under win total on DraftKings Sportsbook opens up at 5.5. 5.5 is the over-under for the Titans in terms of the moves that they've made this offseason and their win total as DraftKings Sportsbook sees it right now. So, Joe, given everything we know about this team, the people that are still here, the people that are gone, and, of course, the new additions that have come in, how do you view this team and the potential for how good or maybe not good they're going to be heading into this season?
I got faced with this yesterday because I'm doing a mailbag, and I got asked a simple question of, predict your order in the AFC South. And I started with the Texans. I think everybody will.
Yep.
Which is so funny, right?
It is.
A year ago, it was obvious it was going to be the Jags. Now it's obvious it's going to be the Texans. But I went Texans, and I'm sitting there. I'm going through it. I went Titans second. Now, again, that could still be 2, 3, 4, all of them around 7 wins, and I don't feel great about it. I mean, look, I still think the Jags could be good. And the Colts are interesting. I think the Colts fans are very, very mad right now about the fact that the Titans got Sneed for what they did, and the Colts were in on that too. They were reportedly in on the discussions. They've basically just re-signed everybody. They have not done much at all. And somebody from the Colts at the owners meeting said something to the effect of, we believe in Anthony Richardson, all this stuff, so we're keeping it the same. It's like, why wouldn't you make yourself better? But hey, I mean, who's to question Chris Ballard and his genius?
That's right.
I think it's absolutely possible Titans could be pretty good, especially because we still don't know all the other pieces that are popping into place. And we certainly don't know how any of them are going to work out. But based on past performance, there's a lot of good football players on this team that are new. So, and of course, there's the excitement of the new coaching staff. I mean, all of it is. I mean, we keep going back to this offseason, and I mean, I think it makes sense to do so because it's kind of like the same sort of breaking point, even though the Titans the last years weren't nearly as bad as the Titans of that era. But no one in their right mind in 2016, on March 26, 2016, was predicting the Titans to go 9-7 the next year. That would have been laughable. So, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? And it's also, by the way, now you don't want the history to totally repeat itself here, but that was also second year of the quarterback on the rookie deal who had his best year to make it possible for them to go 9-7. But there's so many variables, and so many of them, to me, aren't. It's not like it's long shots all over the place. It's just a lot of variables. And if enough of them break the Titans' way, yeah, they could be a playoff team this fall.
I agree with that. Now, the sportsbook do not agree with us at all. And we brought up the DraftKings odds of the win total being 5.5. I'm looking on FanDuel right now, and it's listing out, each division, the favorites, and so forth. Obviously, Houston, number 1 in the AFC South at plus 150 odds to win the division. Jacksonville, number 2 at plus 250. Indy, number 3 at plus 280. And then all the way at plus 600 are the Tennessee Titans. So that's a very significant gap between the Titans and even the Colts in third place. So, look, honestly, it's kind of eerily reminiscent of last year, Joe, of how everybody thought the Titans were going to be garbage heading into the season from a national perspective and from a sportsbook perspective. And around here, we were like, yeah, I don't know. I think they could be a little bit better than people think. And they were not. Now, that doesn't mean that they're always not going to be a little bit better than people think, but it does make me a little hesitant to, last season, I think we drank the Kool-Aid a little bit, and I'm trying to not do that this offseason.
Yeah, that's fine. Now go back and find the odds for, let's see, the Texans, the Rams,
sure.
The Bucks. I mean,
the Texans' odds, I could tell you, were worse than the Titans last year. So
yeah, absolutely, way worse. I mean, and I don't know. I think those things shift when you have I don't think they're like super reactive, are they? Like in terms of move by move when they're going up and down a lot.
No,
I don't know.
Unless
I don't track them on a daily basis.
Gigantic move. No, like
You're right.
When Atlanta gets Kirk Cousins, that affects the line pretty significantly.
Like when Denver got Russ Wilson.
Yes,
that probably, and of course it didn't matter there either. So, yeah, and you're right. Because of last year, we were like, what are these people looking at? And then it's like, oh, I guess they're right. You have that hesitation, but they're wrong a lot. They are. They really are. The house wins, but it doesn't mean the house is right all the time, So, yeah, look, I think the Titans have done enough here to really make people kind of rethink, because even a couple weeks ago, I'm like, well, yeah, they're in a build here. They're trying to find out about their quarterback. They've done some good things. I still expected them to be bad, but I mean, Ridley on one side, Snead on the other, plus the other things and things to come. I mean, that could be transformational.
Oh, it could be. And I do think there's the difference between, especially on the offensive side of the football right now, this year to this point, and then heading into last year with that team. Like there are solutions that are proven in the league and that are not just being like hoped on. Like Treylon Burks, right? We all hoped that we were going to see him take the next step last year. He was going to be an incredibly, focal point of the offense, and it just never happened. I mean, he had the injury in Minnesota, and it was really just downhill from there. He had the one game against L.A., which was like the second or third game of the year, where he had the 70-yard catch, and that was it. and he's not done it at this level on anywhere near a consistent basis. Like Calvin Ridley, say what you will about the gambling stuff, and he has had some injury concerns throughout his career that sometimes he's played through. But like Calvin Ridley is a proven wide receiver in terms of you can look at his career and you could point to the production and it's there. Even last year, like the production is there. DeAndre Hopkins, the production is there. And he played all 17 games a year ago and looked really good while doing it. You know, Tony Pollard has been a productive back in the league. Now, he's coming off – this is year 2 coming off an injury where most of his numbers in terms of the underlying metrics and the yards per carry and all those things, they were down last year, so that is a concern heading into this season. But the point is, like, you could point to players at skill positions on the offensive side of the ball and say, okay, it's not really just hope. They've done it before, and they've done it in this league. Whereas last year, I do think that was a little bit different, particularly at wide receiver outside of Hopkins, where it was just like, yeah, we think Traylon Burks can be good, but we don't know because we've never seen it at the NFL level before.
Right. Like, the funny thing too is like Hopkins last year. I absolutely raised my hand, and when it first came up, I'm like, man, it just seems like another one of those past the prime things. And so even with a guy who was proven, there were questions. I think Ridley is like in that sweet spot of proven, but also, at this point, seriously, the only legit, I'm not even going to put legit on it. The only like real concern I've heard is Kaharski people telling him they're worried about what Ridley will do with a bunch of money. Like,
right.
I don't. Yeah, I'm not going to dismiss things like that, but
as long as he stays out of the sports books, I don't really care.
Yeah, the whole idea of like that. Okay, now someone gets the bag and they're not going to go as hard. After his press, I don't think that's going to be a thing, and we know he can play. So yeah, you're right. There's more known commodities. The draft is still going to be a huge part of whether they're going to be good or not. And those are unknown. All of them are unknown commodities. We all think we know
for sure
what these draftees are going to be, and we don't. So, again, tons of variables, but possibility, absolutely there.
So how good do you think this Titans team could be based on the moves Rand Carthon has made to this point? We'll take your thoughts. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. Our phone and text lines are driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. More coming up next. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Hey, Robbie Stanley here. It's that time of year. Brackets busted all over the place, but that's okay because you can say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Tennessee and Creighton coming up this weekend. It should be a good one, a 2 and a 3. But I got to tell you, I like Tennessee. I think they'll shoot better in this matchup. It will be hard for them to shoot worse than they did against Texas. They were still locked down defensively, so I'm going with the Vols. But you can take it any way you want to take it. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/Rob and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Must be 21 or older and present in Tennessee. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable bonus bets that expires 7 days after receipt. You can see terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Got a gambling problem? Call the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning, taking your thoughts on the Titans and asking the very simple question, how good do you think the Titans are going to be, given some of the moves that they've made to this point in the offseason? Now, Joe, we know there's still the draft coming up, and everybody is penciling in a left tackle for the Titans. Obviously so. I mean, I would be stunned if they come away from this draft and don't have a starting left tackle at the end of it. So we'll see what that looks like, who exactly that is, and how good they are as a rookie, which is always kind of an interesting dynamic of even offensive linemen who you think are going to be just locks to step in and play immediately. Some do. Some it takes a minute to get up to speed at the NFL level. We'll see what happens on that from that front from the Titans. But how good or not good do we think the Titans are going to be? Michael on the text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, says, this may be too simplistic, but I think the level of success next year depends on how much improvement or lack thereof we will see from Will Levis. And obviously, Joe, he's going to play a big part in this. I think the Titans have done, I wouldn't say they've done everything they can do, but I think they've taken significant steps this offseason to try to improve the conditions around Will Levis. Now, there's still the left tackle part of this. There's also the right tackle part of this. Who's going to play right tackle? You know, Brian Callahan was down at the owners' meetings or the NFL meetings yesterday, and Kuharski tweeted out some nice video of his comments on, you know, the offensive line moves they've made to this point, people that are already on the roster, all those sorts of things. So we'll see who ends up playing right tackle for the Titans here. But I do think the Titans have done a nice job to this point of trying to bolster the group around Will Levis. And if that group is in fact bolstered and we have a better gauge of what the skill positions are going to look like on a weekly basis, and it's not just a revolving door out there like it was at times last year, that should help Will Levis and your evaluation of him if you're Rand Carth on the Titans as you're trying to gather more information. There's also the wild card, Joe, of what exactly is Brian Callahan going to be like as a head coach, right? I mean, he's going to be calling the plays. I have no idea what sort of a head coach he's going to be, but I like what I've seen and heard about him to this point. But it's one thing to hear about it in March. It's another thing to see it on the field once September rolls around.
Yeah, you find out about him as a head coach, find out about Nick Holtz as an OC, find out about Denard Wilson as a DC, find out more about Will Levis at quarterback. There's so much unknown. And, I think Callahan, obviously, his pedigree and background is promising. He could have been a head coach a year ago. Other people were interested in him. I mean, Denard Wilson, a lot of people were. I mean, all of them, all of them have come up, and I think Nick Holtz might be the most, I guess, sort of quick jumper, right? But he has the Jags pass coordinator gig last year, and so that kind of put him in a position to do it. So, but there's still, I mean, there's in all those jobs, if you haven't called plays in an NFL game, which of course Callahan will be doing, but they haven't done those jobs at this level yet on Sundays, and so we're going to find that out. I mean, it could go a number of ways. It's a pretty wide range. I mean, I think this team is definitely I think the ceiling has absolutely risen. I think the floor has risen some too, but I still think there's a pretty big gap between both of those, like the high ceiling, low floor. I mean, this is not like a team where you're like, some years it's like, okay, they're going to be about 9-7, that would be, 9-8, 10-7, whatever.
That's
right. Soon we'll be going to 18. So, then we have to adjust to that. I mean, this team, tell me right now, this team goes, 5-12. Okay. Tell me this team goes 10-7. Okay. I mean, that's a pretty big range. And I mean, that would probably be about where I'd put the two. That's about where I'd put the things, but I don't know. It could be worse or better than even those things.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, what happens if Will Levis is great, right? Like, what happens if Will Levis has done everything you wanted them to do this offseason? You surround him with better weapons. Probably most importantly, you get through the end of the free agent process and the end of the draft, and your offensive line is competent, which it was at no point last year. Competent, let's say it is heading into this season, and he can stand back there and actually scan the field a little bit. Like, what happens if he's really good? Like, what does that mean for the Titans? And, maybe the C.J. Stroud example from last year is a little extreme in terms of just, like, how ridiculously good he was. But, like, what if Will Levis turns out to be pretty darn good? Like, all of a sudden, if he's good and you've got better pieces around him, I think it's not a jump to see that the Titans could really make some noise here. Now, I mean, there's the flip side of that conversation too. Of what if he's not, and he gets out there and he stinks up the joint, and then you're all of a sudden, 5-12 next year, and you're back in a similar spot where you're talking about the quarterback position again. But like, I'm not closing off the possibility, Joe, that we could see Will Levis take a very significant stride next season if the conditions around him are improved.
I agree. I mean, look, I think it's more likely that he takes a significant step forward and establishes himself. And if he does, then with everything else in place, with more to come, and with all the holes unlikely to be filled, well, I mean, there's no way they're not going to get to everything. They're not going to, they're gonna make sure they get a good inside linebacker, get at least one other safety, at least another tackle, edge, right tackle. I mean, they're not going to address everything as well as you'd like, but they got a chance to address some of those things. And if he does take that leap, it's a team that can win a lot of football games. Yeah, and and it really does come down to him. It's evaluating him, and it's also leaning on him, to dictate the way the season goes more than anything.
I'll tell you one person who's excited about the Tennessee Titans and the moves that they've made to this point. That's DeAndre Hopkins. He was floating around Orlando yesterday down at the NFL meetings, and Kuharski and others tweeted out video of DeAndre Hopkins being asked about the moves the Titans have made to this point in the offseason and his thoughts on that. Here's what Hopkins had to say yesterday in Orlando.
I'm happy. I'm smiling. So I'm trying to win a championship, and I think everything that Miss Amy's doing and Rand is doing is along those lines. So it's hard not to be happy about the moves we made this offseason and where this team is going.
Hard not to be happy about the moves that have been made this offseason. That's coming from DeAndre Hopkins yesterday. I would imagine, if you're him, seeing Calvin Ridley now on the opposite side, knowing that there's a chance you're going to bolster the offensive line in the draft, maybe still a chance you're going to continue to work on the receiving room in the draft as well. It seems like, according to his comments, Hopkins very excited about what the Titans have done to this point.
Yeah, some Higgins Chase endorsements of Callahan's. I'm sure that made him feel good. Interesting that he's hanging around there too. Usually, like he seems too cool for that event. But I'm sure he was excited to talk to Kuharski.
I'm sure he was.
Probably, yeah. It's been a couple months. I'm sure that got a little. They can talk about Pretty Boy Kelly and have a good old time. Hopefully, they had some eggs with Tom Pelissero.
Hopefully so. Apparently, Kuharski and Tom Pelissero now bros, according to a post yesterday. Pelissero previously blocked him on Twitter, so apparently that's now done. He's unblocked.
Will you be my friend again, please?
I look forward to a stirring update from Kuharski on the program tomorrow about his relationship with Tom Pelissero now.
Yeah. No, I mean, the whole world's a sigh of relief, I mean, it's a world peace with Pelissero and Kuharski.
615-737-1025 is our phone number. 615-737-1025. Coming up next, Vanderbilt has made their hire. Their new men's basketball coach is in place. What do we make of the move? What do we make of what this now means for the Vanderbilt basketball program? We'll take your thoughts on all that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5-106.3 The Game. Score big this spring with Lee Company and the Nashville Predators in the 10K Power Play giveaway. Enter for a chance to win a Kohler home generator or $10,000 towards Lee Company Home Services. A Kohler home generator or $10,000 towards Lee Company Home Services. All you got to do, go online to leecompany.com/giveaway to enter. That's leecompany.com/giveaway, the 10K Power Play giveaway. Contest entries are accepted until Saturday, April the 20th. Lee Company, all you need. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. Joe, the Vanderbilt Commodores have made their next hire at men's basketball head coach Mark Byington, who was at James Madison, now the next head coach at Vanderbilt University. So Byington began his head coaching career with Georgia Southern, has spent the last 4 seasons at James Madison, where he started off 13-7, went to 15-14 in year 2, 22-11 in year 3, and then, of course, this past season, 32-4, a fantastic season, knocked off Wisconsin in the first round of the NCAA tournament before they got thrashed the other night. But obviously a really big step forward in the Sun Belt for James Madison this year, 32-4 overall, and an NCAA tournament win against Wisconsin. So that's the move that Vanderbilt made. It was interesting to watch the reaction to it yesterday because I saw a lot of, at least the vocal part of Vanderbilt Twitter, a little upset, a little perturbed with the move, which was mystifying to me, but maybe it wasn't to you. What did you make of, number one, the hire of Mark Byington to Vanderbilt, and number 2, some of the reaction we saw from the fan base yesterday?
No, it's hilarious. Some of these goofballs are already like, actually, I think I love him now. It's like, okay, just maybe next time just don't tweet, just like, take a minute, take a second. Yeah, I was a little perplexed. I was actually kind of going back and forth with Aria Gerson of the Tennessean, Vanderbilt beat writer about this, because it's like, okay, so what about this is infuriating? What about this makes people mad? I guess basically some Vanderbilt fans were excited about Chris Mack, right?
Yes.
Now, had they hired Chris Mack, then you would have had another group of people saying, okay, so why is this guy? What happened with all the weird crap at Louisville, and why has nobody touched him since? We asking that question, and that would have been a fair question. I think some other people were more excited about, I guess, Bucky McMillan, who, of course, Samford, Bucky Ball, an excitable guy, good coach. I mean, they were in the tournament too, and they had a nice little run, and I mean, they had a real chance to beat Kansas. They didn't have a run, but they had a chance to beat Kansas, and probably got hosed by the refs. But I get that he's a little bit more, I guess, maybe out there and local, and he's in Birmingham and people. But I mean, this is, if you look at him, Pat Kelsey, whoever you want to name, look, Dusty May, I think Vanderbilt fans would have preferred him. Well, he took the Michigan job, okay?
Yeah.
I mean, but this is what happens every year: is you have a certain number of mid-major coaches who have done well, and they get their chance at power league schools, Power 6 really in college basketball, and so Vanderbilt got one, and a good one. The other complaint I've heard is one NCAA bid, which is this year, and 12 seasons as a coach, and that's fine. But remember, when we talk about NCAA bids, we're talking about stackouts, none in 5 years or whatever. If you're in a league that gets 6, 7, 8, then the standard is to go regularly. If you're in one bid leagues, that can be really difficult. And so you look at what he did at Georgia Southern. He immediately had a losing record, immediately went to 22-9, little step back, and then he gets to 21-12, 21-12, 20-13. Good conference records. 11-7, 12-6. So that to me is consistent success. I don't know like how Georgia Southern's resources compare with James Madison, but he goes to James Madison, which eventually came to the Sun Belt,
yep.
Was in the CAA, and like you laid it out, boom, 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 goes immediately to this amazing team he had this year. I mean, I watched him the first game of the year go to Michigan State and win at Breslin Center, and it was like, hey, that's a team, man. So I think it's a good hire. I think it makes sense. I mean, I look at this hire, honestly, Robbie, just like I looked at, let's go back 8 years. Bryce Drew, good hire. Valparaiso had big success, recruited well. give him a shot. We don't know how these guys are going to work out at this level. I don't know if Mark Byington can recruit at this level. I don't know how he's going to do in the portal. He's in a very tough league, despite the SEC's kind of disappointing tournament. It's a very tough league with very good coaches, players, investment, resources, all those things. But Vanderbilt's going to give him. They're going to equip him. And he has high tempo teams, which I think is fun. He has very offensively efficient teams, and that as far as fun to watch, I think that he will have teams that are entertaining and fun to watch.
Yeah,
and that matters too.
I think so too. And I thought it was always going to be interesting to me to see not only who they hire, but like their approach in terms of going about. All right, what are the qualifications that you're looking for in your next head coach? Obviously, with Stackhouse, I mean, he had not done anything at the college basketball level as a head coach prior to taking the Vanderbilt job. He's an NBA guy and a really good player in his own right, obviously. So when you go from that, a lot of times in the coaching search, we see kind of the antithesis of that. And this is a guy that's been around college basketball for a long time, has kind of worked his way up to this point. And again, like you bring up some great questions. How's he going to recruit at this level? You know, how committed is Vanderbilt to really getting involved in the NIL game and the transfer portal game and all those things, which all indications are that they are committed to it and that they're going to be competitive with that. So can they follow through on that? How good can Mark Byington be of picking and choosing players in the portal that could come in and make immediate impacts? Like, that's the name of the game now, especially in basketball. Like when you can find players in the portal that can come in and be impactful for you immediately. But I was always interested to see like what the approach was going to be from Candace Lee and identifying the next coach. And now you've got a coach that's been around the game for a long time, has worked his way up to a certain level, and now has taken the big SEC job and going from James Madison to here. So it's kind of the opposite of what they did with Jerry Stackhouse, bringing in the big name from the NBA who's a big background as a coach as well.
Yeah, and Malcolm Turner was a North Carolina guy, and
Yep.
Stackhouse was a North Carolina guy, and it was – I mean, I think at this point – I'm not saying, it can't work, but the sort of like great NBA player to college coach thing, Stackhouse, Juwan Howard, Patrick Ewing, Chris Mull, I mean, it's been not good, and so I think you see people get away from that. And this is the conventional way to go, and I think it was obvious from the start this is the way they were going to go. And again, I think Chris Mack. I get the his daughter's going to play volleyball at Vanderbilt, and that's fine. So there's a connection, but I mean, that's how could that be a factor in hiring a coach or not, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's just that one was just a little bit too. There's just I don't know. It's gonna be.
It would have
really
been a
interesting
nice
to
story.
see. Yeah, a nice story. And look, I understand. Like Chris Mack has had big time success. He's very good at Xavier, but also again, you got questions about what all went down at Louisville. So. This is a good, solid, sound hire for Vanderbilt. I talked to Bobby Cremins yesterday. Bobby Cremins, anybody of a certain age remembers him at Georgia Tech, Lethal Weapon 3, and Kenny Anderson and some of those great teams. Also John Sally, by the way. Shout out to John Sally. But Bobby Cremins was at College of Charleston after his Georgia Tech tenure, had a very good tenure at College of Charleston, and Byington was his top assistant for a bunch of years. Then when Cremins actually retired, he kind of left during a season, citing exhaustion. So he's done coaching, and Byington was the interim head coach. But he said he works as hard as anybody he's been around, which is a pretty good endorsement. And he also told me that his demeanor is perfect for like today's game and stuff like that. Up tempo, both of them love up tempo offense. So that's kind of partially where I think Byington got some of his stuff. Is Cremins was always an offensive coach, very exciting teams. Especially you remember at Georgia Tech. So I mean, he's done all the things to get to this point, and sometimes these guys work out great, and sometimes they don't. And there are a lot of factors in that, but it's solid.
Joe, I'm going to give Vanderbilt fans some grace. The Vanderbilt fans that I saw yesterday that were upset with this hire and were making their displeasure known on Twitter, I'm going to give them a little bit of grace because I think back to when we were sitting and doing our program and the Tennessee Volunteers hired Josh Heupel to be their next football coach, me trying to jump out the studio window at the time, and it's ended up working okay for Tennessee. So I'll give Commodores fans a little bit of grace for the reaction we saw yesterday.
Yeah, talk about a reaction. Yeah, just play some of our stuff from that day. Oh boy.
Josh Heupel. Who is that?
Oh gosh. Yeah, you just don't know. You just
Ugh.
don't know, you know. I mean, think about some of the higher. I mean, I think of college football. Some of the names where it's like, oh my, like everybody had to have what's his name from Houston, who was with with Urban Meyer at Ohio State, and why the heck is it Tom? Oh my
Oh
gosh,
yeah,
please help me
Herman.
out. Thank you. I
Yes.
mean, he was the absolute like the whole world. LSU was going to give him the world, and Texas, and and it's just like you just don't know. And I know basketball, football are different, but it's the same thing. I mean, this league has quite a few of these guys now who, I mean, Nate Oates, you want him to be the next Nate Oates. And there are some comparisons, by the way, with Nate Oates. They're not quite what Alabama does, which is basically like you will shoot that three now, or you go to the rim and nothing else. You're not allowed to do anything else, But I mean,
Hopefully, also a
Nate
little
Oates,
bit more pleasant than Nate Oates too. That'd be great.
yeah, I don't think he's going to have quite the Nate Oates demeanor, but I mean, LSU, Florida, there's a lot of these schools right now that have and even like again some of the guys who are in the league now. I mean, back in the day, Bruce Pearl came from that when he went to Tennessee. That's the path, And then you'll see how you just don't know until they get to this level exactly how it's going to work out.
Mark Byington, the next head coach at Vanderbilt, will take your reaction to that. 615-737-1025. What do you make of the move? Also, could there be another coach that's been in a lot of hot water for the last week in the SEC? Is he sticking around in the SEC? We'll get into that coming up next. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
let me finish on this stuff, Tom. You know, I talked again about the standard that is the standard that I believe in, that I think we can do. But that standard of national titles has been here from Coach Rupp on. And the only thing that I'm saying to all our fans, I'm gonna work in our state, work for this program and this university, really work for these young people. And that's my commitment. I'm not changing. 24/7, let's go. Whether it's recruiting, all the stuff that we've got to do. That is a commitment that I give to the fans that I haven't changed. This is like wearing a coat. It never goes away. But I love it. This is what I want. This is what I wanted. This is why I never left. This is it. And now it's let's come together and let's go do something. Let's do something special. And we can do it. We've done it. Let's do it again.
That was Coach Calipari, a very impassioned speech last night from John Calipari on his radio program. So first off, Joe, he's doing his radio show, so I guess read into that what you will. He did say on the radio show that he is meeting with Mitch Barnhart, as they do every year here shortly, and that has not happened yet. So we'll see what comes of that and whether or not he's going to be back. If he is, what that looks like. I mean, the whole thing sounded to me yesterday, Joe, and I was kind of following along with Kyle Tucker as he was tweeting out updates of this, of what Calipari was saying. And look, he said a lot. He talked for a long time on this radio show and was talking about, you know, the way of doing things that has been in Kentucky for a long time. You know, that closing statement, you know, talked about the tradition there, his commitment to the state, his commitment to the university. You know, talked about how maybe they need to change their approach and mentioned, you know, maybe instead of going to Toronto or the Bahamas in the middle of the summer, maybe we're staying here and grinding it out and working on the defensive side of the game and all these other things. A lot of stuff said from Coach Cal yesterday. What did you make of his comments and what this means in terms of his future at the University of Kentucky?
Well, I know he's meeting with Mitch Barnhart. My guess is just by his tone that he's got to feel pretty good that he's getting another year, right? I mean, that's one thing. I just can't believe that would all go down and then he would get fired. Maybe it was just him making his case. He has his radio show. He wanted to take the opportunity to make his case, you know. But really, the fans are one thing. It's obviously Barnhart's decision, and by all the reporting around that, like, people are like, Barnhart's not saying anything to anybody, which is really interesting. So I'm guessing that, you know, that he's going to be back. I like how he mentioned in there, he slipped in there, that's why I never left, you know, to make sure to let everybody know, you know, he could have left. But again, it's like who leaves Kentucky unless they're about to get fired? Like, you know what I mean? Like, who? Right. I mean, I guess for the NBA, I guess you could.
He's already gone down that road, though. Yeah,
but he's already done that. Patino did that. It didn't work out, you know. So I mean, that's just, come on, man. You don't need to. You just slip that in there. That's why I never left. But yeah, I feel like, you know, I'm not shocked. I guess I did think that might have to be it. You know, that loss to Oakland and just the stretch they're in of just absolute zero March success. But hey, for the Kentucky fans who were worried that if he left, this amazing recruiting class is going to fall apart, well, you can keep the recruits probably. So look at the bright side.
Yeah, a couple of interesting nuggets. Kyle Tucker put this out there. Quote, Calipari says in his player meetings this week, the first thing he'll do is hug his players hard and say, I love you, and I'm with you till the wheels fall off. Then ask how he can help them make their decision on staying or going. If someone says to me, I'm coming back, Calipari says, the first thing I'm saying is, under 8 months until the first game next year, let's go, because I want this taste out of my mouth. So Calipari's fired up, baby. He's making it known that he's fired up. He wants people to know that if he gets a couple of these players to come back, they could have a special group in Kentucky next year. Maybe they could play a little bit of defense.
Yeah, that might be good. Yeah, that's the weird thing is he's had teams that have played defense. You know, this one didn't. Um, he needs Reed Shepard. Is there any chance that Reed Shepard would come back? Reed Shepard just. I would imagine that the NIL possibilities and reality for him is pretty good. Now he's also. I've seen some people who have him as a top 5 pick in the draft, which to me is a little high. But he's a first round pick.
Yeah.
So, do you have a chance to have a guy like that come back? That would be pretty huge. I'm sure a couple of those guys will see the value in improving their draft stock while still, making good money and coming back. But he's got to get older teams too. But even with that, I mean, Antonio Reeves was an older portal guy, who's on this team, one of their best players. So it's not like Oscar Shibwe was the same thing. So it's not like he hasn't done that at all. He just hasn't found the formula to win.
If he's back, which I'm starting to think maybe the way this thing goes down, but we'll see. I'm very interested to see what the reaction of the fan base is. Because, look, eventually, you're going to get to a point in this process, Joe, where they look at the recruiting coming in and it gets to like June or July, and Kentucky fans will be like, you know what? I think Cal's figured it out. Like, I think this is going to be the year where you're back in there. This is the team that takes us back to the Final Four, and we're off and running there from Cal, and he'll get things figured out. The immediate reaction, if he's back, is going to be DEFCON 1 in Lexington, which it was after the game where they lost the other night against Oakland. I heard some clips from Kentucky Sports Radio, and one of my favorite things I've ever done was listening to the Lexington police scanner after they won the national title in 2012. I thought about firing up the Lexington police scanner the other night. Didn't get around to doing it, but the reaction on Kentucky Sports Radio after they lost to Oakland was chef's kiss. Just amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and that's the thing too. I know. Well, Matt Jones has said he wants him out. It's very different, obviously, but it's like with Stackhouse. You get to a certain point with the negativity, man, it's hard to go back,
especially in college.
And it's awfully close. It's all now. Assuming that whole class comes in, like he's still going to have it. Like when it affects recruiting, like we compared it to Butch Jones, right? Stackhouse's recruiting wasn't good, so I don't even know. But with Butch, they were losing to some guy like Cade Mays went to Georgia, right? Like it was like and then it's just like, no, this is untenable. It's not there with Calipari. So you're right. People will talk themselves into the excitement. They'll get somebody in the portal too, right? And it'll be like, ooh, okay. So, look, he's had the fact that the guy has gone to Final Fours and won a national championship tells me like he knows how to do that. So at least you do have that. It's just inexcusable to have this long of a stretch at Kentucky of teams with that amount of talent and then crapping out over and over again. I still don't really totally understand how that happens. Other than the tournament is just random and can get you any time, I guess.
615-737-1025, our phone number. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Caroline Fenton. We'll get her thoughts on the Titans, her thoughts on what we've seen in the NCAA tournament to this point, and a whole lot more. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Hour number 2, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. And as we do every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, we welcome in our friend Caroline Fenton to the program, host of Caroline, Willie, and D. Mace. Caroline, good morning. Welcome back from vacation. How are you?
Thank you. It is great to be back. I do have to say, when I was on the beach last week, all I could do was think about, man, I miss Robby and Rexrode.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a big part of your thought process last week on the beach.
It was top of mind. But I will say it is incredibly difficult to try and watch March Madness in Mexico. I did everything that I could. I signed up for a Fubo, whatever it is, TV account. That didn't work. Never heard of Star Plus before. However, I am a proud member. That did not work. Tried a VPN. That didn't work. Tried to get some, like janky underground stream that absolutely got some sort of viruses on my computer. That still didn't work. So I'm like standing on one foot, squinting, like leaning off of a balcony to try and get the teeny tiny just semblance of Wi-Fi to try and update with the Oakland, Kentucky score. And I did get the score at least. And that's really all I needed was the score.
Yeah, that is all you needed in that one for sure. That's dedication to really hone in there on the NCAA tournament. Going through a bunch of different options.
A St. Louis Blues game.
Wow,
of all
good.
things.
Who knew the Blues were so big in Mexico?
You can watch the Blues in Mexico, but that's about it.
Well, at least LSU wasn't in.
Wow. Jeez.
I'm sorry. We're going to the Sweet 16. I don't know if that's the real basketball team.
That is true. Well, speaking of that team, we have some interesting stuff going on with that squad. I tell you what.
I mean, if one of these days I'd like to talk about basketball, but instead we talk about drama.
Yeah,
that happens in press conferences.
A lot of things going on. Caroline, I'm going to start with the first question we threw out there this morning. Lots of things going on with the Titans. They made a ton of moves. How good do we think they're going to be? Based on what they've done to this point, the people we know that are still in place, and obviously there's still the draft, and there's still answers to this question that are yet to be determined. But based on what we've seen to this point and the moves that have been made, how good do you think this team could be?
It's a complicated question, and I think it's the $1 million question, because if you would have asked me this question about the Houston Texans this time last year, I would have said, probably not very good. They got a rookie quarterback. They haven't been good the last few years. I definitely wouldn't have said that they would have made the divisional round of the playoffs. If you would have asked me this time last year how good the Cincinnati Bengals were going to be, I would have said I think that they're a Super Bowl team. I think I would pick them to have gone to the Super Bowl. Obviously, injuries you can't predict, but still, I think it just kind of shows how unpredictable this league can be and how much things can change on a dime on any given day in this league. I think that the offense is upgraded because I think that Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins and, I'm not even going to mention Treylon Burks' name because I can't count on Treylon Burks, but you add Calvin Ridley into the offense, I think that the offense is better. You add in Lloyd Cushenberry instead of Aaron Brewer, I would say that the offensive line is already better. Bill Callahan coaching the offensive line, I would say on paper right now, it's already better. The secondary, undeniably on paper, is better with Chidobe Awuzie and L'Jarius Sneed, obviously pending physical, but I don't assume that that's going to be any sort of issue. So those position groups on paper, they're upgraded. But the defensive line, like, who's rushing the passer? Like, who's replacing Danico Autry? Like, is Kenneth Walker going to fill in and be an upgrade for Azeez Al-Shire? I hope so. I don't know. So there's still a lot of questions, like who's playing left tackle? I would assume that the Titans are going into this draft with the intentions of taking a left tackle in the first round. If that's not their intentions, then I don't know where they're going to get a left tackle. But the draft is also unpredictable. What if Joe Alt goes at 5 to the Chargers and they don't really view Ola Fashanu as the 7th best player in this draft? What if they more so view him as the 15th best player in this draft? Do you take him at 7? So there's still a lot of question marks. There's still a lot of question marks on the offensive line as improved as I think it is, just with the additions of Lloyd Cushenberry and Bill Callahan. You still need a left tackle. You still need a right tackle. You still need to upgrade on the defensive line. But the wide receiver positions and the cornerback positions, I do think are upgraded. So how good can they be? I mean, like, yeah, sure, they can make the playoffs. because anything can happen in this league. But I still have some concerns.
So how would you, I guess, not that it's totally over, but we're kind of in that break now, between free agency and the draft. How would you grade the Ransformation? Okay.
Oh, boy.
Hashtag Rans plan.
Rans
hashtag
plan.
Rans plan. There you go. How would you grade what he has done so far? I mean, we'd all agree there were a ton of holes there. They was never going to address all of them, but what he has done, how do you evaluate it?
I think he's done a really good job, because and one example that I will use is the Titans were very obviously publicly flirting with L'Jarius Sneed for a while now. Like, this goes back a month or so. Like, this goes back several weeks that we were talking about a potential L'Jarius Sneed and Titans trade. It goes back several weeks of reports of the Titans being interested in L'Jarius Sneed. And frankly, after a while, I just kind of lost hope that L'Jarius Sneed was going to be a Titan. I just kind of assumed, all right, well, L'Jarius Sneed's going to stay with the Chiefs because whatever L'Jarius Sneed wants money-wise is too rich for anybody. Whatever the Chiefs want in compensation for L'Jarius Sneed is going to be too rich for anybody on the market. But they found a way to get it done. And I have to give them credit for that. And that's a position group that, since I've been in Nashville, hasn't been very good. But it might not be very good this year. I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. But at least on paper, it's absolutely upgraded. I have to give credit for Rand Carthon for going out there and making some big boy moves. But also, I have to give credit to ownership for opening up the checkbook a little bit. Because we've been talking about how much money the Titans have to spend for a long time now. But I think that there were a lot of Titans fans that were concerned that, yeah, we got all this money, but they're not going to spend it. The Titans never do. The Titans are cheap. Which you can think what you want to think, but I do have to give credit for the Titans opening the checkbook a little bit. Credit goes to Rand for making those deals happen, and credit goes to Amy Adams-Strunk for coughing up the cash.
So, Caroline, on the Vols front, it was about as ugly as it gets shooting the basketball the other night, especially from three. I mean, it was brutal to watch. But they won, and they survived, and they advanced, and that's what it's about this time of year. And that sets up a matchup in the Sweet 16 with Creighton. So if you're a Vols fan, based on what you've seen really all year long, with as dominant as they were in the regular season, having said that, 2 of the last 3 games have been rough to watch from a shooting perspective. The Mississippi State game in the SEC tournament where you got bounced, and then the last time out against Texas. How do you view this team right now? What's your concern level with what's going on offensively for Tennessee? Or do you think they snap out of it this next weekend?
It was like Iowa football in the hardwood.
It was bad.
That's what it was. Bad. It was bad. I think that 2 things can be true at once. And I do believe that both things are true. First and foremost, in March, all that matters is that you find a way to win. You survive and you advance. And it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be a blowout. It doesn't have to be a 30-point win. You don't have to be shooting, 60+% from 3. All you have to do is just find a way to win. And Tennessee did that. And they played a great defensive game against Texas, held them to less than 60 points. They made clutch shots when they needed to. They made their free throws when they needed to. And they did just enough to skate by the hair of their chinny chin chin, and they live to see another day. That's true. I also think it can be true that you can look at 2 out of Tennessee's last 3 games, Mississippi State in the SEC tournament and Saturday night against Texas, and say, man, they haven't been shooting very well. Because against Mississippi State, that was putrid. Like that was I felt like Tennessee was playing with a ball 30 pounds heavier than Mississippi State was playing with. So I think that you can be equally encouraged by what you've seen from Tennessee finding a way to win and equally concerned by their shooting woes out of their last 2 of the 3 games. I do have a shred of concern. One, because of, the past 3 games. They haven't been shooting very well. And 2, because of, let's be honest, recent history with Rick Barnes finding a way to poop his pants in March. But overall, we know what this team can do. We've seen it all season long. They're not an elite 3-point shooting team, but they're pretty darn good. And they've got Dalton Connect to be able to fall back on. So I think that I can look at the greater scope of what this Tennessee team has been all season long. And I can look at the Mississippi State game and the Texas game and say those are more of flukes than they are what this team truly is. So absolutely it's a concern. But overall, I mean, it's going to be a great game against Creighton. And overall, I'm not changing my expectations for this team. I think anything short of the Elite Eight is a disappointment.
All right, I'm going to actually pivot since you brought up Kim Mulkey and LSU. Tennessee yesterday loses to NC State, does not make it to the second weekend. Kelly Harper, 5 years, and this program's been fine, good, not great. Should Kelly Harper's job be a serious discussion point this offseason for Danny White?
I think that it should be. Because the expectation for the Lady Volunteers program is that you are consistently competing for a national championship. And look around at the rest of the SEC in women's basketball. Like South Carolina is the class of women's basketball. LSU is coming off of a national championship season. Ole Miss is a really good program. What Coach Yo has done in turning around that program in the last 2 to 3 years has been really freaking impressive. Like Tennessee's what, probably the 4th or 5th best program in SEC women's basketball? That's not the expectation of the Lady Vols. I look at the same thing with Kentucky basketball. That's not the expectation of Kentucky basketball to be the 4th or 5th best program in the SEC. So I think it should be a serious question. If you're looking at what this team has done over the last, 3 or 4 years, when was the last time they got to an Elite Eight? When was the last time
Holly Warlick was a coach a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been too long. It has been too long, and this league is getting way too competitive. They're overdue. They're overdue for national relevance, for being in the national conversation. So I think absolutely that her job should be in question.
Caroline, I know that this was probably better than being at the beach last week. We appreciate so much you taking time to be with us this morning, and we'll be listening at 11 o'clock.
Joe, have you apologized to Jared yet?
What for John Hines?
Yeah, he went on about it again yesterday.
I just heard, I was driving around yesterday evening, and I heard Jared saying, Joe needs to apologize.
It's been a whole segment.
No. Oh, my God. Are you serious?
I'm Team Jared.
What is – I mean, I guess I get it. I mean, there's nothing going on this time of year, so it's worth a segment.
Awfully quiet.
I am sorry, Jared, that I said that John Hines is possibly the greatest coach in American sports history. Is that what he said? That's probably what he said.
I'd like you to say it with more gusto, please.
Yeah, it didn't feel very sincere.
Yeah,
I'm writing
and pleading on your hands and knees.
Jared, please forgive me. Jared, I'm so sorry.
I didn't mean it.
I'm writing him a nice letter.
Good. No. That's good. That's good. Thank you, Caroline.
Appreciate y'all. Have a good one.
Caroline Fenton joins us every Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock. Coming up next, speaking of the Nashville Predators, we'll get into the Preds. They've got a gigantic game tonight. And I was asked a question yesterday that got me thinking a little bit. I think the answer may be pretty interesting. We'll get into that. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell and Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Thanks to Caroline Fenton for being with us in the last segment. A gigantic game coming up tonight for the Predators at Bridgestone Arena, taking on the Vegas Golden Knights. Preds in the first wild card spot right now, Vegas in the second wild card spot. Vegas wins in St. Louis last night, and that game goes to overtime, so St. Louis gets a point out of it as well. So not a great result for the Predators. Vegas 3 points back of Nashville now. So if you can win tonight in regulation, you're dead even on games played with Vegas, and you're 5 points up. If you lose tonight in regulation, Joe, one, your point streak comes to an end, and number two, you're 1 point ahead of Vegas with the same amount of games played, 10 games left in the regular season. So a crucial game tonight for the Predators at Bridgestone Arena. I went on with our buddy Jeff Merrick yesterday on his show up in Toronto, and he asked me a question about the Predators that I think is really interesting to consider and think about. Obviously, we all know about this run. It's been a lot of fun to watch, 17 games in a row. They've been right there with anybody you want to point to in the league over the last month of the way that they're playing hockey, and it's been fun to watch. Has the way that they've played and potentially what they will do from here on out, and there's a couple of different scenarios that we can run through on that point, but has that influenced the way that Barry Trotz will operate with this lineup moving forward? We've talked about how they're not really a young team right now. I mean, I laid it out the other day. And by the way, they might have Jeremy Lozon back tonight. Stasny was skating yesterday. Their defensemen are starting to get healthier here. So the young guys that are there right now, like Adel Gaizo, he might be out of the lineup here pretty shortly if Lozon and these guys start to come back. By the way, Fabro out there too. So a lot of good news on the defense front yesterday. But Luke Evangelista really is the one young guy right now. I mean, when you break down their roster, Evangelista at age 22 is like the one super young forward that they have that's actually playing. Like Cody Glass is 24. He's not playing right now. So Evangelista is like the one guy they got that's playing that's a young guy. So with that in mind and the winning that they've been doing, I think everybody kind of assumed, Joe, that this was going to be like a 2-3 year process of trying to get back to contention and being a Stanley Cup contender at the end of that. Has the way that this has gone down changed the way that Barry Trotz views that? Like, does he think that this team can win now? Does he think that this team in the offseason, let's say they play great from here on out, they get matched up with Colorado in the first round, that series goes 6 or 7 games and you lose it, but you still feel like you played great, that you're right there with them. They go on to win the Stanley Cup, all those things, and you feel like you're not that far away from being a true contender. Does that influence the way you view your group next offseason, and the rebuild, quote-unquote, part of this just kind of goes out the door at that point? How do you view how that kind of impacts Barry Trotz's decision moving forward here?
Yeah, it's a great question. But I mean, first of all, I think you have to take this to the goalie discussion, which of course I think I'm flipped back to, you just got to pay Saros. Which a few weeks ago I was like, you got to go with the young guy and go on that. But I think the timeline, again, the timeline is Forsberg and Yossi still great to me. The timeline, and I mean, look, and O'Reilly is a key cog. Even if I know Trotz has talked about, you can go down the lineup and all that stuff. I mean, if there's something that makes that possible, great. That's what you're trying to do. So I think that's what you were trying to do anyway, right? I guess is it a little bit more urgent to try to leverage? To me, it would be leveraging, it's picks, it's cap space, and it's a Skarov. Leveraging that for some kind of a big deal to bring in somebody to take you up a clear notch on paper. I mean, but you could have made that case even if this wasn't happening, right?
You could, but I guess I think it could go further than that. Like if you think that they're actually like right there, like if you get through the end of the season, whenever it ends, like obviously if they get to like the conference final, I mean that's a different conversation than what we're having right now, and I think you start to view things differently that way. But even if it goes like they close out the regular season here, they're clearly a playoff team. At some point, I think they're going to lose in regulation here, but they continue for the most part to play the way they're playing. They get to the playoffs. They're matched up against Colorado, Dallas, whoever. They take them to the wall, and they get beat in 7 games. And you feel like you're right on the edge of being one of those teams. Like, even if it's beyond Askarov, like, do you look down at your minor leagues and say, you know what? We really like Svechkov, and Svechkov might be able to help us in 3 years, but we can parlay Svechkov into something that can help us right now. You know what? We really like Joachim Kemmel, and Joachim Kemmel we feel like can help us in 2 years, but we could parlay Joachim Kemmel into something that can help us right now. Like, does it change the way you view that? Like, I know there are some Predators fans that hear that right now and would be like, oh my God, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
And I get it. I really do. Like, sure. I totally understand that. But I just wonder, like, they're playing so good. Does that change the way that Barry Trotz views this thing here, maybe to a bigger degree than previously anticipated?
Okay, yeah, I got you. So basically, some of these untouchable prospects become less untouchable.
Correct.
Does that happen? Yeah. It's a great. I mean, it's
because if not, like I was telling Jared this the other day, because everybody keeps calling this like, oh, you're one of the rebuild, and they're already ahead of schedule, and I'm like, well, guys, like, it's not really a rebuild right now. Like, look at their roster; they don't have any young guys. Like nobody's playing that's young outside of Evangelista. So, like, at some point, if you don't go that way, the young guys have to come up. Like, there's going to be players they have in Milwaukee right now that are ready to play in the league next year. And that when you bring them up, that's going to change your team to some degree. Now, maybe it's just a short-term change, and maybe they eventually get up to speed. But when you bring them up, that is going to change the dynamic of your group. So I just wonder how Trotz views that.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting situation. To me, it's like, right now, the good thing is, there's so much critical information to come that's going to help shape that,
Yes.
for Trot. So right now would be a very tough time to answer it. I do feel like, yeah, like your scenario where they finish out strong and they're right there, but they lose to the Avs in a good series. I mean, I think there's still like a Kemmel, maybe, maybe that's a guy you're like, yeah, like he actually in a couple years is going to be key. And so he's going to be a guy who's going to produce and at a very low rate. And that's too valuable, but maybe there are a couple guys in there who become a little bit more at risk in a deal because you're thinking a little bit more, okay, the timeline's shortened up a little bit.
Well, again, like if Barry Trotz is operating under the same, I guess, timeline that you are, which I think to a certain degree he is, like with Yossi and with Forsberg being really good. And by the way, both of them are at the height of their superpower right now.
Yeah,
so
they're stars right now.
Exactly. So like that, I think to some degree has to influence the way you're thinking here. And again, like I think it would be a mistake to just like go all in this offseason. I think you can do a little bit of both. Like I think you can maybe part with some prospects that previously you weren't considering parting with to get some help right now. And I also think I think Kemmel's a perfect example. Like you could let him continue to develop and eventually when he's ready, bring him up to be a part of it. You can do both. There's a way to thread the needle, but I do wonder if his approach has changed on that front. 615-737-1025, our phone number. How do you think the approach should change for Barry Trotz as it relates to the long-term plan for this Predators team? Should it change at all? We'll take your thoughts on that on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game.
Say goodbye to busted brass kicks, folks, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of this tournament. Joe Rex here letting you know whether you're betting on a big upset. We've had some of those, or a 1 seed. They're all still around. Time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers are going to get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. If I'm looking at this week, like I said, the 1s and 2s are all there. I'm looking at a 2 locally, Tennessee. If I'm doing a parlay, 2 things I like. Tennessee against Creighton. I like Dalton Connect. I don't think Creighton has anybody to guard Dalton Connect. I think he's going to have a big game. $200, you can use that on point spreads, on money lines. You can pick who's going to win it all. I am sticking with Purdue on that, by the way. Just visit FanDuel.com/Joe102. Bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. You must be 21 or older, present in Tennessee. First online real money wager, only $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is now withdrawable bonus. Bets expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem, call the Tennessee Red Line, 800-889-9789.
Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Big game tonight for the Nashville Predators, and we want to send you. We got a pair of tickets to see the Preds take on the Vegas Golden Knights tonight at Bridgestone Arena. And I got a trivia question that, Joe, I'll be honest with you, I just came up with about 25 seconds ago, and I'm very proud of it. And it may be too difficult, but we'll see. See how it goes. The Philip Forsberg-Martin Erat trade, very, very famous here around here. Forsberg coming here, Erat going to the Washington Capitals. There was another player involved in that trade. Who was the player? There was another trade that went from Nashville to Washington. Who was the player in that trade? If you know it, hit up our text line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. The first person to correctly identify the player outside of Martin Erat that also went to the Washington Capitals will win tickets, a pair of tickets to see the Preds take on the Vegas Golden Knights tonight at Bridgestone Arena. 615-737-1025. Thank you. I'm very proud of it. Ethan from Lawrenceburg says, I guess the question, going back to whether or not Barry Trotz's plan should change here given how good this team has been, I guess the question, who is the big-time number one killer that you can trade for? Throw a name out there. So to that point, Joe, the free agent crop this offseason is not great. I mean, there are a couple of good names, like Jake Gensel right now could become a free agent. We'll see if he re-signs in Carolina. Sam Reinhart in Florida is scheduled to be a free agent. We'll see what that looks like. I mean, he scored 50 this year. So there are a couple of interesting names. Like Stamkos is not the same player he used to be, although he's about to score 30 goals again, but he'll be 35, so we'll see what that looks like. But it's not like it's an elite free agent crop. So in terms of like players you could trade for, could you get it like – I think Toronto is really interesting again this year because if they don't make noise this year, which it's not looking like they're going to, like if they're one and done in the playoffs again,
they got to
like at some point you got to change it up, right? Like you can't just keep going back to the well of, well, we're paying Nylander, Marner, Matthews, and Tavares all this money, and we'll just keep trying to do it, like and see if we can force the square peg through the round hole. So I'd keep an eye on that situation. I mean, there's one situation I could bring up that I don't think is going to happen, but is interesting that people in Pittsburgh are talking about of like Sidney Crosby getting really mad at the Penguins about the way that things are going there. Could you get yourself involved in the Sidney Crosby front? That'd be something. But I'll believe that when I see it. But the point is, like this goes back to like our conversation at the deadline. You've stockpiled enough assets from a draft standpoint, and you're in a pretty good place, not an elite place, but a pretty good place with your prospects, that when one of these names come up, and they do maybe not every year, but every couple of years where there are big names out there available to trade for, I think the Predators are going to be in a position from a cap standpoint, from an asset standpoint, to insert yourself in that conversation. So like if a Mitch Marner becomes available, you're gonna be in a spot, if you're the Predators, where you can seriously consider doing that. Not that you would be guaranteed to do it, but you can absolutely be one of those teams that's in the mix if guys like that become available. And would you be more willing to pull the trigger on that now if you're Trotz?
Yep. Gover said 2 words: Mitch, period, Marner, period. What I want to know is why would Ryan O'Reilly rather play anywhere in the world but Toronto after last year? Or so it seemed.
Yeah.
Who in particular made him feel that way?
Well, it was probably a combination of maybe some guys in the room, but also like that place in general is just an absolute circus. Like I thought about that before. Like people, not that you can't win there, and I do think if you won there, it would be awesome, and like the way that they would go down would be great. But like just the day-to-day stuff there has got to be exhausting if you're a player. So I think not everybody's built for that.
That's a good point. Yeah, that could be.
I mean, the city of Toronto still considers it a huge personal affront that Ryan O'Reilly is a Nashville Predator.
Yeah. Well, and if you're him going from St. Louis to that too, that's a transition.
Absolutely.
But I also still got the sense that it probably ties in some to why haven't they been able to figure it out, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's got to be some of that there too of like, clearly the Predators, Merrick asked me this yesterday too, like after the 9-2 loss to Dallas, I think the way he phrased it was, I can think of a few Nashville Predators teams that had that happen to them, that would have been it. And they would have folded up and they would have been done. And this one obviously went the other way. So why is that? Like it's not like the Predators changed up their lineup after they got beat 9-2 and their season looked like it was falling apart. You had Mark Jankowski come in. And Jankowski, I think, was there for the Dallas game, too. So, like, it's not like they went through some dramatic change after that. And to me, it seems more and more clear that whether it's Yossi that you want to give credit to or a combination of Yossi and McDonough and O'Reilly and all these guys we've talked about, they finally looked around and said, hey, you know what? Enough's enough, man. Like, we can't keep just kind of coasting through here and think that's going to be okay. And they bought into the way they got to play, and they've done a great job of being consistent with it every night. So clearly the intangibles that Barry Trotz was looking for this past offseason, I think, have paid off in a pretty obvious way here for the Predators. There are other teams around the league like that, right? Like, there's teams that clearly have a formula right now that don't work, and sometimes that requires you to mix that formula up. And if you're the Predators, can you take advantage of a team doing that?
Yeah. And, you bring up Trotz, and it's pretty clear, as we've talked about Burnett as possible Jack Adams, but, Trotz, I think among the GMs, he's got to be – the job he's done, he's got to be up there too. And you got to believe that his time as a coach in this league, being out there every night with these guys, has really given him a keen sense for who he wants and who he doesn't and why, right?
Yep.
It's got to be a big – now, does that over time, does that edge a little bit because he's not on the bench every night? Maybe.
Maybe.
And I don't think there's any doubt that that's been a positive factor for the Preds.
Right. And look, I don't know that it helps you in every situation, right? I do think, they're good. Look, there are going to be moves that Barry Trotz makes that don't work out. It did.
Sure.
It happened. And there's been a couple already, like Guryanov did not work out, and there was almost zero risk in that one too. So there are going to be moves that he makes that he's either paid a lot for or that he's given up a lot of draft capital for that don't work out at some point here. Every GM goes through that. But it is interesting, like, the reaction when they signed O'Reilly. It was like, really, 4 years for O'Reilly? I'll raise my hand. That was my reaction. I was like, 4 years for Ryan O'Reilly. Gus Nyquist, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, Gus Nyquist. Clearly, there are things that he identified with those guys that have directly paid off with this group. And I do think being behind the bench – and I'll even add to that, behind the bench, and now you've got a working relationship with Andrew Burnett, which he really didn't have before besides like the player-coach dynamic. Now you got kind of have a better view of what kind of coach he is, what works in his system, what doesn't work in his system. So I think that should help them moving forward when they're making their decisions this offseason too.
Yeah. No, it's you can't argue with the results, and look, I think we were all kind of there. The same thing is like, what's the timeline here? Like, what exactly you're trying to do? The culture thing makes sense the way they described it, right? But like, it's still like if you're installing culture and you're not a good team, then there's limitations to that.
Right.
But the fact that they've done what they've done, I'd like to know how surprised truly Barry Trotz is. He looks at this hockey team and watches them night after night and says, my goodness. There's got to be some level of surprise, right?
I would think so. But, with each passing game,
maybe
it's
are.
less and less surprising. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's wild to watch. Nick Keyser, do we have a winner for our trivia question of the day?
Yes, we do. And I got a lot of response very quickly, and our first winner was not eligible. So
Okay.
make sure you listen for 30 days. 30 days is our max, by the way. But Sean Mahoney is our winner this morning. So, Sean, thank you for texting in. Appreciate you.
Correctly identifying that Michael Lotta, also the player involved in the trade. So everybody makes the Erat Forsberg comparison, which, that's basically what it was. But a nice sweetener for the Capitals as well with Michael Lotta coming the other way. Joe Rexrode, did you know about Michael Lotta?
When you say it, I do. I'm like, oh, yeah. But no, like when you asked the question, I didn't immediately have that answer ready.
I didn't figure a whole lot of people would.
Michael Lotta.
We had
That's a good one.
Good amount of
But the reaction was swift, man.
It was good.
A lot of swift, correct answers. Good job.
Very good stuff. Go to thegamenashville.com/bracket challenge and fill out your 16-team bracket to compete to win great prizes, including tickets to see Kings of Leon at Bridgestone Arena coming up on September 26th. The 102.5 The Game Bracket Challenge brought to you by ESPN Bet Sportsbook, Twin Peaks, and Volunteer Hose and Gasket. Coming up next, a really important moment here on our program, the debut of Nicked Off Nick Keeser's rant of the day. We'll get to that next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment, let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
You're everyone's problem. That's because every time you go up in the air, you're unsafe. I don't like you because you're dangerous.
That's right.
Nice, man. I am dangerous.
I feel the need for speed. Ow!
It is that time of the day, not for the Rex Rant, but for the debut edition of Nicked Off. Now, apparently, Nick Keyser has done one rant before when it was Rexrode and Kuharski on the program as I was out for paternity leave. But that was not officially named, and that was not called Nicked Off. So I'm going to act like this is your first time you've ever done this.
Absolutely.
A lot of pressure. We'll see how you come through. But I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you're ready.
No pressure.
For the debut edition of Nicked Off here on the program. Nick Keyser, without further ado, the floor is yours.
I'm just glad Joe was on time because he was MIA for a good minute or two there.
We
by
started
golly.
off by immediately
All right.
calling out Rexrode. I like it.
Just waiting on him to get started, but okay. So
Packing, sorry.
Oh, okay. Packing. Okay. There you go. All right. So I have to preface, and Joe, you travel a lot. Robby, you've been in the Nashville airport recently.
I have.
But for me, I was really perturbed with how my flight was delayed for one. So I was not happy coming back to Nashville Sunday regardless.
From Milwaukee.
From Milwaukee, by the way. Yes. And I get on the plane, and it's a full flight. I understand that. And I get whatever seat I possibly can. Now, given it's whatever I see toward the back, right? So I get on the plane. I sit down. Gentleman to my right, acknowledges me. Doesn't say anything. He's watching a movie. So then I sit down right next to him thinking, okay, someone's going to sit next to me. That's fine. I don't care. This lady sits next to me after being shown, hey, there are aisle seats right over here. Why don't you join these guys? So she even acknowledges us and says, hello. And I was like, hello, cool. And then we get, we
Glad
take
that
off.
you're friendly.
Right,
That's good.
right. So we take off things I thought went well to start. She sits right next to me, and I fall asleep for a little bit, but I proceed to be waken up by her kicking my feet. And I look over at her, and she's twitching in a dead sleep, right? And she wakes up, and she's adjusting left, right, tossing and turning, and I'm like, can you stop kicking me, please?
Did you say this?
I just about did, honestly.
Okay. All right.
Now,
So you kept it to yourself.
I did look at her when we landed, and I was just like, what is wrong with you? You are all of my personal space, and there's a code and conduct kind of just stay in your lane in your seat, please.
Did she fall asleep on your shoulder?
Just about, pretty much. And I mean, look, this was a lady that was probably in her late 50s.
Okay.
And just had no acknowledgement for her personal space whatsoever. And I don't deal with that very often, but when I do, I am not happy about it. So, look, I ended up just dealing with it. It's fine, but I was on edge. I got in the car, and Kristen's like, why are you so pissed? And I was like, because this damn lady, she's all up in my business, kicking my feet. I'm trying to sleep after a long day, and this is what I have to deal with. So
Playing footsie.
Yeah, playing footsie with a 50-year-old was not what I had in my cards coming back from Milwaukee. So that was not very fun for me whatsoever, and I'm just trying to relax and have a decent time coming back. So anyway, I bet the Preds brass up front in the plane didn't deal with that whatsoever, right, Scott Nickel? So, but anyway, it was fun. I enjoyed my trip, but coming back, atrocious.
Rexrode?
I hated it. So if anyone else has any similar experience to me whatsoever, I'm all ears.
Rexrode,
anyway.
is Keyser overreacting? Is it fair play to be upset with the lady all over his feet on the flight? How do we feel?
Well, first of all, I feel like you're a little bit rough on people in their 50s. I just want to, speak up for my generation. I think if you fly enough, you get in those situations, somebody falls asleep and they just kind of slump into your personal space. And I mean, I have sort of gently kind of nudged, like a little bit of a kind of move them over. And usually if they're really dead asleep, usually they're not going to invade your space unless they are dead asleep. So
she wasn't dead asleep.
You can do a little bit of that and be okay. If they're not dead asleep and they're conscious of that, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I've never been kicked. I've never been kicked
that's-
before. That would be something. I have had somebody fall asleep and like slump directly over my shoulder, to which I was just like, all right, we're gonna have to remedy this situation. Just a gentle nudge of, hey man, here you go. Yeah, you just lean over to the other side there. But never been kicked before on the plane.
I did not, yeah. And she did it consciously a little bit too, because she got up and got her drink and continuously put her feet back in that spot. So I was not a fan.
Maybe showing you who's boss in there. Like, you think this is your leg space, but it's not.
Maybe.
I'm here to tell you it's not.
Well, there's always also, like, you know, if you're on the aisle, your inside arm, that's on the inside, and the person in the middle, who gets the armrest, there's that too. I mean, I don't know what the exact rule is. I typically give up the armrest if I have an aisle, and I always have to have an aisle to stretch my leg if possible. But, I know some people get the aisle and they still think they get that armrest. So that's an interesting one. And if the middle person gets both of the middle armrests, is that fair? Is that how it should be? And the people on the window and aisle just each get their outside ones? I don't know.
Well, the guy to my right had the armrest up, which I was perfectly fine with. So I like having that space to myself where I can just have my arm down and I can just relax. That's also fine. But yes, I think verbal affirmation there is what you need there, Joe.
Okay. So what we've also learned is Rexrode is a plane snob and has to sit in
Probably,
a seat.
yeah. That's what I think.
Well, I mean, I have the...
You toss me any seat. Doesn't matter to me.
I have the legs of a 6'8" guy. I have the upper body of a 5'10" guy. But, like, I mean, my legs are... And especially now with my knees where they are, yeah, man. I mean, it's not a snob. It's out of necessity. I mean, there have been times when I haven't been able to do it. And it's very bad, very, very bad, very painful.
How would we grade the first edition of Nicked Off on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'd give it a solid. I'd give it a solid 6.5. I'm not. I think that's fine. It was not pure outrage. But you can't manufacture those things either. I think it was a fair complaint.
I think a fair complaint too. I'll go 6.7. My score. Well done, Nick.
I kind of expected it to be around like a close to a 7, kind of like how
6.7's close.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, thank you guys.
You round up, it's 7.
Does this mean he can start grading our rants now?
I guess so. Well, it's just his first one. Look,
Yeah,
he's smiling. He feels
I'm
good
sure
about
that I'll
himself.
have more this summer after I get married for sure.
Well, I'm sure.
I'm
sure you will.
I think maybe she now has a nicked off rant.
Oh, trust me, she listens.
You're
to
anticipating trouble.
Yes, I'm sure that if you didn't have them before, you may have just created one for yourself.
Maybe so.
615-737-1025 is our phone number, 615-737-1025. We'll get back into the Titans coming up next. We've thrown out the question earlier today, how good do we think the Titans can be? We'll get to some comments yesterday from the owners' meetings down in Orlando as well. Rule changes coming about, which we'll also get to in the next hour. And Mike Herndon from PaulKuharski.com coming up at 8:15. All that coming up here on the program. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Final hour, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by Chuck McDowell Medical House Calls, Middle Tennessee's best medical care in the comfort and safety of your own home. For more information, go to medicalhousecalls.com. Medical House Calls, where the nearest clinic is your home. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. We'll be joined by Mike Herndon from PaulKuharski.com coming up at 8:15. Get his thoughts on the Titans and what they've done to this point in the offseason. So looking forward to that. The NFL's owners' meetings are going on down there in Orlando, Florida. Paul Kuharski from PaulKuharski.com, who will be with us on the program tomorrow, caught up with Amy Adams-Strunk briefly yesterday down there at the owners' meetings. Here's what Amy Adams-Strunk had to say about the Titans and the moves they've made to this point.
About the way everything's gone since the big changes.
Well, there's been an exciting couple of weeks, I tell you. I'm just thrilled with what Rand and Chad and Brian were able to get done.
Do you imagine they bring that many people through the door this quickly?
I didn't know quite we were going to head that way, but you know what? I'm super thrilled, super pumped, super excited for our fans about how it's all going to go down this next year.
And a couple of those guys said they felt the energy of employees top to bottom as they walked in. I imagine that was exciting.
That definitely feels good to me. I'm glad that's the energy. I'm glad they're excited to be here, and I think it bodes well for our season.
So that was Amy Adams-Strunk down at the owners' meetings yesterday. I enjoyed that. By the time question 3 rolled around, looked like she was ready to get out of there. Now Paul, you've done asked me 2 questions. It don't need to be no 3 now. I got places to be. I'm in a hurry. Leave me alone, Paul.
You could hear the urgency in his. You could tell.
He was like, I got another one for you. I got one more.
Yeah, but hey, he got her. That's good hustle on PK, and I mean, that's very, very difficult, very rare. I mean, Amy Adams-Strunk is going to speak to anyone that isn't someone who works for her.
Yes, it was very rare. So good on Kuharski for catching up with her yesterday. Lots of stuff going on at the NFL owners' meetings. That we'll get to some of the rules here in just a second. I do want to read something that Mike Reese, who covers the Patriots for ESPN, just put out there. Robert Kraft discussing the Calvin Ridley situation and how I guess he got away from the Patriots. Shares that Calvin Ridley told the Patriots his girlfriend preferred to be in the South. He said the team had been willing to make up the difference in taxes between Massachusetts and Tennessee while acknowledging that the QB situation could have been a factor. This is what Mike Reese put out there. This coming from Robert Kraft this morning at the meetings in Orlando. So apparently Calvin Ridley's girlfriend wanted to be in the South, and they didn't care about the difference made up in taxes between Massachusetts and Tennessee, Joe.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm glad he acknowledged the QB thing. I mean, I've got to think. I mean, obviously, if you're Calvin Ridley, you're not looking at Will Levis and saying, hey, I'm going to go play with an all-pro quarterback. But you got to think there's a chance he's going to be pretty good. Whereas what they're going to do, we don't know. I mean, maybe they'll end up with Jaden Daniels, but who knows? And who knows how good he'll be.
Exactly. So they're discussing changes to the kickoff rules down there where basically they'd adopt like the XFL-style kickoff rules where they're lined up 10 yards away from each other once the ball is kicked, and they're trying basically to do as many things as they can do to eliminate collisions on kickoffs. We're eventually, I think, Joe, going to get to the point where the kickoff just probably doesn't exist at some point. We're not there yet, but that's probably where we're going here with the NFL at some point. There's the hip drop tackle part of this, which we'll get into here in just a few minutes, but the owners' meetings, pretty interesting stuff going on down there from the rule change standpoint. I know the hip drop tackle now being banned, like I saw defensive players reacting to this, and their basic response is like, how in the world do you want us to play defense right now? Like you can't really be in anybody's general area code playing defense when the ball's in the air. You get a pass interference penalty. You can't hardly breathe on the quarterback anymore without getting a roughing the passer flag thrown. When a receiver goes up for the ball, there's like a limited strike zone of where you can hit him. And now when like somebody's trying to tackle Derrick Henry, you can't do a hip drop tackle anymore. So how in the world are you going to get him to the ground? It's a tough time to be a defensive player right now in the league with the rules the way they are.
Yeah, it's the rules that are like quote unquote safety rules, or you could also just double read them as help the offense rules. Let's have more scoring. Defense, took a little step forward last year in the overall numbers. I think it's going to be. I truly believe this is going to be a 1-year thing. And I could be wrong. I mean, obviously, safety measures. I mean, first of all, let's always acknowledge the absolute hypocrisy here of safety measures when the owners are pushing for an 18th game, and when teams play on Sunday and then Thursday and all these things. I mean, safety, 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 except for all these things that make it less safe. I don't see how this is going to be one of two things. I think this is going to be like the pass interference review rule, where it's such a rarity that it just goes away. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it'll be all over the place, and flags will be everywhere for basically, you know, typical tackles. I don't know. It's so much about how it's going to be enforced. I think this is going to be a 1-year thing, though. I don't see how you can, in egregious cases of this, there are examples that they showed where you're getting a guy's leg pinned and you are injuring someone. I think you can still throw a personal foul for something like that, right?
Yeah.
But the actual act of the hip drop being illegal, it's going to be so impossible to sort through this. And they're going to be, if you got a game determined by something like that, when there's no danger at all to someone, which is what happens with most of these, the vast majority of these, boy, is that can be a problem.
Right. Like you can find examples of somebody executing a hip drop tackle where basically their bottom lands on the back leg of somebody and it gets their knee all twisted up, and all of a sudden you've got this gruesome injury and a torn ACL or a compound fracture or whatever it is, and the stretcher's coming out, and it's awful. And that does happen. I mean, I would say I don't want to assign a percentage to it, but the overwhelming majority of the time the hip drop tackle is used, people just get right back up and they continue playing football. And sometimes it just happens throughout the course of making a tackle, and it's not even what somebody tried to do. That's the way it goes down. So, to me, I'm really interested to see how they enforce this, because sometimes these plays just happen when you're holding on for dear life trying to bring somebody to the ground, and that's the way it happens. Are you just going to throw a flag every time? I'm with you. I think eventually it's probably going to get to the point where, unless it's just an egregious case of it, the flag is not going to be thrown, and that kind of goes against what the rule is intended for anyway.
Yeah, go back to college basketball a few years ago. The hook and hold was a big thing, right? It was an emphasis. And then it basically, for a while, it was called constantly, you know? And it was basically anytime guys got their arms locked up, boxing out for a rebound, there was a decent chance it was the hook and hold was going to be called. It was just this huge point. And, there was an awful, in fact, it was a Purdue big, I forget, Harms maybe, I don't remember, but awful, gruesome injury. That's why it became this big thing, right? So then you get to a point where it's if there's a bad one, first of all, I do think that it got it out of the game a little bit, and then still, if there's a bad one that hurts someone, then do it, right? So I'm hoping that's what happens here. Basically, those ones that you're talking about, you're not supposed to do this, so you get it out of how you're doing it, and you got to know if you do it and you come down on someone's leg, and certainly if they get hurt, you're gonna be flagged, and you should be. But then hopefully we move past where it is an auto flag for tackling like that, because sometimes you have to, and again, most of the time when you do it, everybody's fine. So I'm hoping that's the way it goes, but I can see this being a real headache.
By the way, the kickoff rule just passed. So Ian Rappaport just put it out there that the hybrid kickoff model has just been passed down at the NFL owners meetings as well. So add that one to the list. Kickoff is quickly becoming a thing of the past, of the way that it used to be. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Coming up next, we'll be joined by Mike Herndon from PaulKoharski.com. You're listening to Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. We go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and say hello to our friend Mike Herndon from PaulKuharski.com. Mike, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're awesome, man. Appreciate you taking time to be with us. So it's been a very busy offseason to this point for the Titans. Ran Carthon and the Titans very active in free agency. Number one, what do you make of what they've done in free agency, and how do you think that translates to the field? We were tossing this around earlier, Mike. The expectations from the sports books, from the national media, is still very low for the Titans heading into this next season. How do you view what they've done in terms of the competitiveness and what we could see come this time in the fall?
I kind of thought that they would be aggressive in free agency. I'm still not sure I even fathomed them being this aggressive with the Ridley deal, with the Snead trade. They've really gone for it in a lot of spots. Now, there's certainly some spots that still need addressing, middle linebacker, a safety spot, an edge spot, defensive line needs some depth, things like that. But and obviously tackle still isn't fixed. So there's still some spots to address, but they've been very aggressive. And I guess to me, you don't go and get a Calvin Ridley and a L'Jarius Sneed. Ridley's 29, I believe, and Sneed is 27. So they're in their prime still, but not, 24, 25-year-old guys either. I don't think you go get those guys if you're planning on this being a long rebuild. I think they're doing what they can to support Will Levis and give him a real shot to show whether he has the goods or not, which ultimately is going to be what this season is mostly about for the Titans, I think. Can they be competitive? I actually think so now. I wasn't so sure before free agency, but these are some pretty big additions that move the needle for me, frankly, and I think pairing that with whatever they do in the draft, I think there is a chance that you see this team, in a competitive spot and challenging for a playoff spot this year.
On Snead in particular, Mike, first of all, how do you think that works with the corner group they suddenly have and with Denard Wilson and what he wants to do on defense? And then also, do you have any concerns? I know that there was, some people have asked us today in the text, and I know that's been out there. He had knee swelling in camp. But then he appeared to have no issues during the season.
Yeah, and to start with, I guess the knee thing, I don't know enough about it to really know whether that's something to be concerned about or not. I mean, it's like you said, it does seem like he played. It certainly did not hamper his play on the field. I'll say that last year. So if it's something that just requires a little bit of maintenance and is not considered like a degenerative issue that's going to get worse as things go on, then I think that's not really that big of a cause for alarm. It's something to keep an eye on for sure. But, none of us have seen MRIs or scans of his knees. So, who knows how bad it is or even what it is. We really don't have any details at all on that. But as far as play on the field, I think Snead, to me, he slots into this corner group perfectly because, to me, a Woozy was a little bit of a miscast, I guess, as a 1. But as a 2, he slides in great. I mean, he's I feel like a high-end 2 still at this point in his career. And then Snead is your top dog. Snead to me is one of the top 5 or 6 probably corners in the league. I don't think he's quite Sauce Gardner, but he's not far off from that top group. And he does everything. He can play man, he can play zone, he can shadow the other team's best receiver, which is what Kansas City asked him to do. He can play in run support, he can play in the slot, he can play outside. He can do it all, and he does it all at a high level in a defense that is pretty complex on the back end for Spagnuolo. So what I think Denard Wilson wants to do is kind of have this be a secondary-led defense from what it appears. Certainly that's now the strength of the defense very clearly, which will be different for Titans fans from what we've seen over the last few years. And I think it's very interesting when you look at the other additions like Kenneth Murray, who I view Kenneth Murray's best use as a football player is when he is coming downhill as either a blitzer or just being able to really sell out and run defense. So putting a strong secondary behind him and maybe freeing him up to blitz a little bit more does make some sense. So if that is the direction that they're going, I think that's a very it's a plan that makes sense on all levels from the additions that they've made. So I think that could be a good hint of what Denard Wilson wants this thing to look like.
Mike Herndon with us from PaulKuharsky.com. So, Mike, on the Ridley front, obviously him and Hopkins being the 1-2 now, are you comfortable with the receiving group as currently constructed with Burks being the presumed 3? Would you like to see them still add to that group with a relatively high pick in the draft? How do you view where the Titans currently stand at wide receiver?
I'm comfortable with the receiver room for 2024 as it stands right now. However, I think for the draft, you do have to look at what happens beyond 2024. And, DeAndre Hopkins is on the end of his contract here coming up this year. He, is 32 years old. There's no guarantee that, A, he'll be back for another year, or B, that he'll be back in a capacity that looks like what he looked like last year, which was still really good. So to me, this is kind of a situation where if you're going to take a receiver, it's about building for the future and making sure that you don't have, this good receiving core in 2024 and then a big drop-off when Hopkins either leaves or retires or maybe his play declines in 2025. So to me, it's about an investment in the next 4 years, more so than in 2024 if they go receiver. And it's about taking advantage of what is a really deep and strong receiver class. So I still think receiver should be in play in day 1, day 2 range. But, obviously there's some big holes to fill in other spots. And look, they haven't invested in the defense in the draft in a long time. So there's a lot of things to weigh there for Rand Carthon. And I think ultimately I just keep coming back to this thing like you need more picks. So I think trading back from 7 or 38 or both remains almost a necessity for this team at this point.
So obviously we're not going to hit everything, Mike. One of the spots that I'm really interested in is right tackle. Do you think that the right tackle answer is on this roster right now? Potentially?
Potentially. And I would say potentially would be Nicholas Petit-Frere, which was extremely discouraging last year, even like setting aside the suspension stuff and the injury. The play on the field was bad last year, like flat out a step back from his rookie season, which is never what you want to see. Now, I think there were enough flashes during his rookie season to think, okay, maybe there is a player in there that Bill Callahan could get out a better version, a more consistent version of him in year 3. But, do I want to enter the season hanging my hopes on that at right tackle? No, absolutely not. To me, in addition, like Cam Fleming, who is not a sexy name in the free agency pool, he's like, a 30-year-old swing tackle who has started a couple seasons but, never really been like a guy that a team has committed to at one of those spots. He's mostly just been a high-end backup wherever he's been. I think he's a guy that would make sense to come pair with Nicholas Petit-Frere, and whoever wins that battle wins the battle, and the other guy's the swing backup. I think that makes sense because I still think 7 or after a small trade back is going to be your left tackle most likely. And the nice thing about Fleming too is he can play left tackle as well. He's played both sides. So to me, he gives you a lot of flexibility heading into the draft and heading into like what you want that tackle room to look like. So I do think they need to make a veteran addition in addition to what they've got and what they're certain to draft next month. But, yeah, Nicholas Petit-Frere would be the only one that I really hold out a ton of hope for at the tackle spot right now.
Mike, last thing for you here. Obviously, they've made significant investment and improvement in the secondary right now. You lose to Nico Autry. So when you look at players rushing the passer, you feel good about Simmons. You feel good about Harold Landry. That's about it, at least from my perspective at this point. So how concerning is that, and how equipped do you think the Titans are to fix that as they go through the rest of the offseason here?
Yeah, it's definitely a concern at this point because I think Arden Key and Brian Callahan echoed the sentiment yesterday. That I view Arden Key as a situational player.
Yeah.
He's not a starter. He's not an every down edge rusher. So, and I don't think, Rashad Weaver certainly hasn't shown enough in his 3 years with the team to make me feel like he's ready to step into a major role in this defense, or at least not in a capacity that you feel great about. So I think they have major issues there. And again, like I said, you'd love to get a wide receiver for the future. You'd also love to get an edge rusher because even if you charitably look at this thing as like, all right, Harold Landry and Arden Key can still be good pass rushers for you. They're both 28 years old, and, you don't have young guns coming up behind them. I mean, I know people fell in love with Caleb Murphy last year and his story coming out of Ferris State and everything like that, but we certainly have not seen enough that you should be hanging any real hope on him becoming a guy. If he is, he's a pleasant surprise for you. So to me, again, that second pick in the draft, wherever that may land, I could see like a Chris Braswell or a Darius Robinson being a good fit for what they're needing as far as giving them somebody opposite Landry that can be a part of the future moving forward. Because, the pass rush is still going to be critical no matter how good your secondary is.
Well, Mike, great stuff as always, man. Really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Mike Herndon from PaulKoharski.com, our guest here on Robby and Rexrode. We'll react to what Mike had to say. We'll get a little deeper into the kickoff rule that was just approved by the NFL owners as well. All that coming up. Make sure you tune into 94.9 The Fan today as Vanderbilt baseball takes on Valparaiso with pregame at 5:45, first pitch at 6. Vanderbilt baseball brought to you by Smoky Mountain Tops, your countertop experts. Visit SmokyMountainTops.com. This is Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, live from our Spring Hill Heating and Cooling Game Nashville studios, keeping your home feeling comfortable all year round. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you. Appreciate Mike Herndon from PaulKowarski.com for being with us in the last segment. Joe, what'd you make of Herndon's? So Herndon seemed to be pretty locked in on the idea of trading back, be that from 7, from 38, maybe from both, as he threw back there. What did you make of Herndon's draft strategy there for the Titans to pick up more picks and address more needs?
Probably easier at 38 than at 7, just the way things are shaping up right now. I mean, certainly someone could want to get into 7 for some reason, but the quarterback situation is kind of, as we've talked about, kind of moved to the point where getting right in front of Atlanta isn't something teams are going to automatically think about. I think, a lot of times you can find somebody who wants to get into your spot in the second round for somebody. So, yeah, like I think if they can get more picks, I think that would be great. I just have my doubts that they're going to find an opportunity with 7. So we'll see. And if they do, then yes, unless you're like, Joe Alt is going to be our great left tackle forever and we can pick him, or we can get more picks. Get the great player. Get the great player. If you believe he's a great player, get the great player. And as the Titans need both. They do need, I agree with Mike, that they need more picks. They need as much draft capital as possible. They need as much draft impact on this roster moving forward as they can, because right now it is bereft of great draft picks that are still on the roster.
Bereft.
But also, thank you. And also, Zach, like my transformation pun. What a day!
Yeah,
what a day with the English language. But also, like this roster is bereft of great players. So you got a premium pick right there, and you can get one. I'd stick there. I agree. Like at 38, if you got a lot of people kind of similarly ranked, and someone loves someone and they want to get in front of someone, and you can do that, I'll do that all day.
It is interesting to think about wide receiver, though, both from are they good enough right now, and also the future of the position beyond Hopkins, because Hopkins has 1 year left. I mean, look, he could have another great year and the Titans could bring him back, and he could be here for another 3-4 years. I have no idea. But 1 year left on the deal. You just signed Ridley, so Ridley's going to be here at least for the foreseeable future. But like that next guy, I think Titans fans I've seen it this offseason, and I guess I get it to a certain degree, but I just can't get there. Like, they're trying to talk themselves into Burks being that guy, and I get it. You drafted him in the first round, and you've changed the coach up now for a more offensive guy and a new system, so you're hoping that Burks can come in and thrive there. But I'm kind of with Caroline earlier in the show, who says, if that happens, great, but I'm not even factoring him in when it comes to, like, the future of the position until I see him give you a reason to do so. Like, until he provides me with a reason to factor him in, I'm not factoring him in. So I think you have to keep that in mind if you're the Titans about the future of wide receiver too, of like with this draft being what it is. And look, to that point, like one thing that's been pretty consistent over the last 3 or 4 drafts, the wide receiver position starting to become a place where you can find some wide receivers that can make impacts for you up and down the draft. Like there's a lot of talent coming at the wide receiver position from the college game. And I don't think that's just all of a sudden going to stop here over the next couple of years, but it does feel like this draft in particular is pretty deep at wide receiver. So can you take advantage of that if you're the Titans? Do you have that luxury to do that? Or given the holes specifically at edge rusher on the interior of the D-line, if those type of players are there, are you going to be forced is probably the wrong word, but more inclined to go that route?
Yeah, I still think even though they've gotten to this point where they can be competitive next year, they can compete in the division, I think, on paper, and have a team that could make a push, be in the playoff race in December. I still think, I'm a big believer in that the big board. So I think the answer is still, well, actually, we think, this D tackle is just higher on our big board than this receiver, so we're going there. I get the best possible player you can get. Of course, you have to address need, and they're going to in some way with left tackle. You mentioned with Burks, you drafted him. That's a thing too. That's an important point on this. They didn't.
Correct.
They didn't make that move. So a good GM in this league still, even if they did make that mistake or coach, you have to just go with the information and not. But I think it's human nature to try to want to hold on a little longer if it was it's just like a college coach. Did the AD hire you or not?
Right.
If the AD hired you, you probably have an extra year. If not, you might have an extra year less. Extra year less? Yeah, whatever. You know what I'm saying? So
that was bereft of making sense.
3 berefts in one segment. Yeah, I think that the Burks question probably is some kind of, and that's what I'd be fascinated to hear. The conversations in there about Burks when Callahan goes through the film on Burks. If he goes through the practice film last camp, he's gonna be like, "Oh no, we don't need to draft anybody. This guy's amazing," But what is the conversation? What's the feeling on Burks? Like my feeling on Burks, as far as like in the room, when you talk to him, when you see him at practice, going about his business, ever since that first mini camp when he's out of shape and had the asthma and all that, like I feel like he's doing everything right, and I feel like he has talent. But I'm with the bottom line is if you get that few opportunities and make that few plays, that has to mean something other than just that you're in a bad offense.
Right. And does that, I mean, I do think there's a chance, and I'm not going to say a high chance because I don't know that I believe it's a high chance. There is a chance that with the scheme change, the coaching change, and another year of him just getting ready for the NFL through the offseason of being healthy, there's a chance that maybe he can put it all together. And I still, putting it all together, that has changed for me on Traylon Burks as to what that means. Like when they first drafted him, putting them all together, it's like, could he be a number 1 wide receiver in the league? Like right now, if he could be like a good 3 for you, I would take it. Now, I know a lot of Titans fans wouldn't, and that's not what you drafted him to be. They want he needs to be wide receiver number 1 or wide receiver number 2. And that's fine if you feel that way. Right now, if you told me today that next season Traylon Burks would be a reliable 3, I'd say, yep, that's fine, because he's not even been that to this point in his career. So I would take a reliable 3 right now for Traylon Burks with no questions asked. And I don't have confidence that that's going to happen, but I'm leaving a small window that maybe Brian Callahan can unlock something there.
Yeah. I mean, like Dustin from Oxville said, I get rid of Burks right now. NWI is over him. I mean, why if you can get rid of him for something, fine, but you're not. You're not going to get anything. So, look, NWI, I respect him. And he's a great guy to have in the room. He should not be over Traylon Burks, and they should be able to unlock Traylon Burks to the point where he is ahead of NWI. I mean, the ceilings between those two, a pretty significant difference. No idea if Burks will approach his, but I do think there's still a decently high one. And yeah, if that guy could be, and that sometimes it does happen in this league where he's a 3 now, and then Hopkins is out, and he builds on that confidence and become a decent 2 in this league. It's not impossible. It's not like some fairy tale. I would not bet on it, but I would like to see these guys take a crack at it.
Joe Chris on the text line is trying to claim Ransformation as his invention over yours and has a text timestamped at 8:33 yesterday. I would like to point out you had Ransformation way before that, like in the 6 o'clock hour yesterday.
Absolutely. You're not going to listen to the 6 o'clock hour, Chris.
You're the winner.
I don't know what to tell you. Thank you. Well, by the way, Dane from Nolensville is trying to take credit for nicked off, but I think that Zach Football and other F words had it on our text line earlier too.
Yep, a lot of people trying to steal credit on the text line today. A lot of things going on.
We got some receipts.
Coming up next, it's time for Pred's
bereft of a point.
Coming up next, it's time for Pred's Pick to Click. Huge game tonight for the Preds against the Vegas Golden Knights. Be the first caller at 615-737-1025. If you guess a goal scorer for the Preds tonight, you win a pair of tickets to a future Nashville Predators home game. That's next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025-1063 The Game.
It's time for Preds Picks to click.
And the shot of the score.
Do you think you know who will score a goal in tonight's Predators game?
Little give and go.
Shoot your shot for a chance to win Preds tickets. Call 615-737-1025 now. Pick to Click is brought to you by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty. Visit tjandersonhomes.com to see why they are preferred so often. It's Pick to Click, now on Robby and Rexrode.
It is time for Preds Pick to Click on Robby and Rexrode, presented by TJ Anderson Homes of Benchmark Realty. List your home with TJ to get your home seen, heard, and sold. Preds in action tonight, taking on the Vegas Golden Knights at home. Puck drop 7 o'clock, pregame 6 o'clock. Here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game. The standings in Preds Pick to Click, the listeners remain in first place with 16 correct answers. Rexrode on the board, last time out, up to 14, so drawing closer to the listeners. Keys are also on the board, last time out, up to 11. I remain at 7 correct answers in dead last place. With that in mind, we go to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, and welcome in James. James, good morning. Thank you for calling in. Who is your pick to click tonight for the Nashville Predators?
Good morning, fellas. I'll take Philip Forsberg.
James, thanks for the call. Forsberg, the selection, going for goal number 40 tonight, Rexrode. If he gets another one, it will be goal number 40, his second 40-goal season of his career. Good thoughts.
Really
Nick,
hate that pick from the listener.
Nick, your pick to click for the Nashville Predators, Forsberg, is off the board.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the younger gun on the team. Luke Evangelista, I think, will get back on the board this evening.
Luke Evangelista, the selection. I'm up next. I'm going to go with the captain, Roman Josi. We'll find the back of the net tonight. Forsberg, Evangelista, Josi, off the board. Joe Rexrode, your pick to click.
Okay, hold on. I have a guest picker.
Okay. Oh, God.
Hey, guys. We're vibing. I picked Gus Nyquist.
You might need to log off.
Thank you. If anybody was just listening on the radio, I mean, that was just absolutely terrible radio. But if you're watching the stream, I hope you enjoyed that.
Joe's wearing his We're Vibin' Robby t-shirt and just pantomimed my voice through the end of the – I mean, I guess pantomimes don't have a voice, but just puppeteered my voice through the end of things there. It was good stuff. Nyquist, the selection by Joe Rexrode / Robbie Stanley. Forsberg, Evangelista, Josi, Nyquist, the picks and Preds pick to click today. Big one for the Preds tonight. Larry on the text line upset that we're calling every game big now. Every game is always advertised as a huge game. Well, that's what they are this time of year. It's a big game.
It's the end of March, champ. You stick with the calendar, buddy.
Chief.
That's what happens.
This one is, I would refer to it as especially big. Preds are 3 points up on the Vegas Golden Knights in the second wild card spot. So Vegas wins last night in St. Louis, but they win in overtime. So St. Louis, which is the closest team out of the playoffs to you right now, they're still 8 points behind you. But Vegas in the final wild card spot, 3 points behind you. So if you win tonight, especially in regulation, you're 5 up on Vegas. You're feeling good about yourself. You're in a pretty good spot to hold them off with 10 games remaining. If you lose in regulation tonight, Vegas is 1 point behind you with 10 games to go, and that race is going to get pretty darn interesting for those two wild card spots down the stretch.
No doubt. So it's huge from that perspective, without knowing exactly what the matchups would be either way. But also, I do think this is another one of those. There you go. One of the best teams, the defending champ. Game matters. Playoff-like intensity.
Yep.
Are you good enough? They lose, 3-2 tonight, not throwing in the towel at all. But to actually win these games, I think it's more than just the standings, too.
Well, we'll see what the defense score looks like tonight. Lozon was on the ice yesterday. Looks like he might be a game-time decision. I mean, Stastny and Fabro were out there, too. So we'll see who all's available, who is playing tonight, who's not quite ready to come back yet, and what that looks like on the back end there. But it's going to be a fun game. I mean, Vegas, obviously, they loaded up at the deadline. They're the defending Cup champs. They got some of their guys back. They still have Stone back, but they're playing really well right now. So if you're the Predators, can you keep this thing going? You got Vegas tonight, Arizona on Thursday, which has been a tricky place for you to play. And then Colorado on Saturday on the road. And Colorado is red hot right now. And that, like, if you're asking me, like, the wild card difference between spot 1 and spot 2, obviously there's no way for me to know this, but this is just me making a prediction. Whoever ends up in wild card 2, I think is probably going to end up playing Colorado. I think Colorado's, at the end of the day, going to end up winning the West, and they're going to be the number 1 seed. So, like, avoiding the playoff matchup in the first round with Colorado, I think would be advantageous. So that makes tonight's game bigger.
Yep, would have been advantageous 2 years ago when it was possible. Different situation, but, you know, I mean, who knows? It was Calgary was the alternative, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. Colorado avoidance has again become a big priority, I think, for teams in the West.
Yeah, I mean, they're really good, and they've, ever since the deadline, they've really ramped it up here. They're 9-1 in their last 10. They've won 9 in a row. So when you talk about the 2 hottest teams in the league, it's the Preds and the Avalanche in whatever order you want to put them in. So first off, it'd be a fun test on Saturday. Preds have beaten them twice this year. They've both been at home. We'll see what they can do on the road when they take on Colorado on Saturday. But first things first, coming up tonight against the Vegas Golden Knights. That does it for us today. Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their day. Joe, enjoy your trip to Detroit. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Jason Big Joe up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.